Hello and welcome, luminous beings. Today is a very special day. We have the most amazing man present with us today. His name is Elijah Ray, and I've been wanting to chat with him for a long time. His work and his music and his sound has inspired me greatly in myself as a person and also my parenting. So hello and welcome, Elijah.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having me.
For those of the viewers who haven't had the blessing of meeting you and knowing your work, would you like to just give them just a little brief rundown of who you are and what you're about and what you bring to this earth?
Well, that's quite a big question to start with, isn't it? I'll start with the most simple version of that answer of who am I. I'm a growing and budding musician and composer and a recording artist. I love to play music, and I love to share sound that inspires people to live the highest versions of themselves. And the genres of music that I love to share and play in the world have been, it's funny, every time someone asks me that simple question of, what do you do and what kind of music do you play? I find it's actually very difficult to answer that question. So I kind of make up a new answer for that every time I'm asked. But one thing I love about sound and sharing music for audiences, both in concerts and sound healing events and online, is I just love how sound unites us. And I guess that might be a bit of a theme as to who I am and what I'm sharing in the world is through the arts, but also through connection and community service projects and whatnot. Just finding what is that common thread that unites us. What are the things that we all have in common? And I find music is kind of the heartbeat of that in my explorations. So I tend to focus a lot on music.
Beautiful, beautiful. You talk in your music, one of your songs in particular, but it seems a beautiful theme that runs through all of your music, about a new earth that is rising. Would you like to give us an explanation as to what that means to you?
Yeah, the new earth really isn't new, is it? But I wrote a song called The New Earth, and so that song has kind of become, in a way, a bit of a soundtrack for a lot of the conscious communities around the world, and where I feel I was coming from when that song was written was just noticing this fresh flavor that after so many thousands of years of one kind of relationship that humans have had with the earth, I feel we're starting to return to a new way of interacting with her as a living being, as an actual conscious organism. And so really there's nothing really new about the earth, but the song is kind of giving us an opportunity, and I think that phrase, the new earth, Eckhart Tolle wrote a book actually called New Earth, and so I think just that phrase evokes something for us to inspire a new relationship with the earth, and I think that's really what it is about, is more of our relationship to her and our relationship to this beautiful earth that we're walking on, raising children on, building massive skyscrapers on, but if we were to have this new relationship with her, I wonder what kinds of new co-creations would come out of that, and that's a bit of what the song's about.
Yes, yes. And from my perspective, with this new earth, that does definitely have, from my perspective, a new flavor. I feel like we're being gifted with new children, with new DNA and new hearts and new minds that think so much differently to our past. And I feel like that is really happening a lot faster now with the children coming through. But I also feel that there were forerunners. There were those of us who came earlier that were in the older, denser energy to impregnate this new energy into the old energy. And when I felt into you, when I first heard your music and saw you, I really felt that from you. But with your earth age, I also see that you would have been I feel, one of these forerunners. Do you feel that?
Humbly, I would like to answer a big yes to that.
Yes. As
well as putting it in context within the multiple waves of souls that are arriving on the planet. So
yes.
I do feel like a forerunner of my wave that I'm on, but I also pay deep respect and honor to the waves that came before me that were the forerunners. So in a way, it's almost more like a cascading of consciousness.
Yes.
And it's almost like each new wave that arrives on the planet brings in, and we're talking about souls here, and we're talking about things that are words get a little tricky when you're speaking about the non-physical meeting the physical, and we're still, I feel, developing language that can really speak to this in a way that's grounded and not too fluffy, but also is just acknowledging that there is a non-physical reality. Most of reality is that which cannot be seen. Even our particles in our body are 99.9% space, right? So just acknowledging the reality of that. I very much feel that when I came into physicality and was born through my beautiful mama and papa, I had this little awareness, this little, almost like a little radio station in my head, and my heart, really, that gave me a sense of hope and clarity, even amidst all of the dramatic events that would play out in my life around me. It's almost like this little radio station linked me into this knowing that I was a part of a group that was bringing a sense of grace and light and love to the planet, and I didn't know why or how that was going to look. I just felt it. It was something that carried in me since I could remember. So I feel, even looking back at the waves that came before me and everything that happened in the 60s and the revolution and all of that, those were the forerunners too. And then back in the 20s and 30s, there was a bit of an arc of channeling and all this connection to the spiritual realms that were happening at that time. But then you keep looking back and you see, wow, we're just all riding on each other's shoulders, really. So I just want to be really clear that I don't feel I'm special or different in the sense of being one of many forerunners. Yes. But what I do feel is unique about the wave that you're speaking to and invoking around the indigo children and the crystal kids, and so these terms are kind of doing their best to describe something that has been happening in these last few generations, in my generation, yours, and many others. And so I will speak to that. I just wanted to make sure I was coming from a wholeness perspective.
Thank you.
And so, yes, I have arrived, like many of us, to bring in, you might say, a clear radio signal, so that others can pick that up too and broadcast that too. I think of it very much as like a shared network of energy, and I really want to support those who are listening and anyone who is feeling this in themselves and trying to figure it out, to not get too stuck on the labels. Yes. And not get too caught up in what we're calling things, because then all of a sudden we can kind of separate ourselves out from the thing that we're naming and labeling. Like, oh, are you an indigo? Yes, I am. Oh, but then you're not an indigo. And then all of a sudden we've separated and lost a little bit of an opportunity to feel our brother and sister where they're at and offer them this radio station, so to speak, this frequency of love, whether it's coming through an indigo or an elder far beyond that came in earlier than that, or the new kids that are here now that we could call rainbow kids, or there's many different ways to call them. Yeah. So each new wave of soul consciousness that arrives brings in, you might say, a clearer signal so that everyone else can pick up that same signal. So in a way, even before the original indigos came, there are many conscious beings doing great work, but then when the indigo kids came in, they made that radio station all of a sudden more available. And so then people of all ages could tune their channel into that and kind of get on the indigo channel. Does that make sense? Definitely. So I'd love to maybe steer our consciousness just a little bit away from the tendency to name things and think that it's a static thing, and really see that it's more when someone's walking with great consciousness and love. If they're really a great teacher or a true indigo, soul or whatnot, really the signs of that is that they're going to be making that more available for everyone around them. Then they're going to be inspiring change and growth and a feeling of inclusion with everyone around them. They'll probably be shying away from the label and saying, "Yep, I'm an indigo,
Yeah, exactly.
and I'm better than you." It's not about that. It's about yes, I came in with this feeling and this knowing and a feeling of purpose of wanting to share and make my fellow brothers and sisters get even more comfortable in their skin, because I know that's my mission, so I want to make that available for other people too. So that's, I think, more at the heart and soul of what the indigo conversation. I'd love to see it diving deeper into that conversation of how these amazing souls are just making consciousness more readily accessible for the planet.
Yes.
And so that gives us all an opportunity to kind of to tune our inner radio station dial into that channel. And you just notice when someone walks into the room, no matter what we would call them, and they're in a really great mood and they're feeling really good about themselves, or they're feeling like they're centered in a frequency of love, you kind of feel like all of a sudden just being in the presence of that person, like it's almost easier to tap into it yourself. You ever notice that? Yeah, so in a way the Indigo Kids have done this on a mass scale by embodying into this time and place in history to bring a bit of lightness, but also bring a bit of clarity that sometimes can be intense for those who are really attached to the old system, that its time has come to shift out of that system. So the Indigo kids sometimes can show up in a bit of a warrior position in terms of slicing through the illusion. It's like you can't, if you'll excuse my language, you can't bullshit an Indigo kid. You can't lie and expect to get away with it. And so much of the old archetypal system of that top-down perspective of few people who have the power and the resources kind of controlling the masses, the Indigos and likewise all of those who are carrying great consciousness and light at this time, we're kind of here to help bridge, slightly dismantle that energy and bridge a new energy. And so there are those who are really focused on the breaking down of it. Yes. My coding is more about shining the light on the new and creating inspired pathways for us to kind of build that together in a way that is as graceful as possible. Because there's enough people who are working on the tear down destruction part. Yes. That's not my part. My part is in illuminating as much as possible how graceful it could be.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of my audience and what I work with in my work is exactly in alignment with what you just spoke about. And a lot of the children that I attract are those who aren't fitting into the existing world.
Yeah.
I also feel that it's my mission to create a new way of being and to help these children by creating a place for them to feel safe, to express this new energy in. One of the things that does come up constantly in my work is the struggle, like their struggle to be in this energy, and when they're very young, to believe in this radio station, and when their little worlds are telling them otherwise, they struggle sometimes. I know I felt that as a child. Did you feel like that when you were younger, before you really more incarnated into who you are, or did you always know this?
It's a really great question. I felt very alienated as a child. In a lot of ways, I relate to what you're speaking to, and it wasn't always easy, and there's been a lot of struggle and meeting of the edges of growth, of feeling sometimes so alone and different that part of me just wanted to escape. And throughout my life, I never took it seriously, but there's been moments where I just even consider, do I really want to be here? You know, and I think that's a very real, raw place that a lot of kids go who in a way are carrying codes of something that doesn't really fit with the current structure. But you know, I like to look at it like this. I'm sure you're familiar with the process of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and how the caterpillar. I just love the symbol and the analogy of it. That the caterpillar will create a chrysalis around itself at one point of its life, and it will actually completely melt inside of that chrysalis. The entire integrity of its structure will melt. So as far as the caterpillar is concerned, it's dying. It's the end of its world. It is in the death throes of its life. And there's these little imaginal cells. They call them, like, some of the cells of that caterpillar are imagining and holding on to this vision of what it is to become, which is the butterfly. So there has to be just enough imaginal cells in order for it to truly become a butterfly. But as far as all the other cells, even inside that caterpillar's body, are concerned, those imaginal cells are bad, and they are attacking them. Yes. So if you could just imagine, within this one little being, there's this little microcosm of what's happening on the planet, which is that the old is attacking the new and making it feel alienated, making it feel wrong, trying to say, you know, you don't belong here, this is going against our way of life. We've always been a caterpillar. We've always been, you know, like, who are you to try to come in and change what we're doing here? But it's literally, it's the caterpillar's destiny, or how I like to say, it's destiny to become a butterfly. And so there are those of us who came in to, in a way, kind of play the role of these imaginal cells. And we, you know, there's nothing I could ever do to stop that. I am an imaginal cell of the new earth. I am focused, and everything that pours through me is inspired by the vision of a more beautiful world. That's just what I do best. And I see that others who do that too. I've noticed that a lot of the youth can become disheartened by the lack of immediate support or reflections that we look to from the world to show us, good job, mate, you're doing great. Like, thank you for this beautiful vision or this art or the book you just released. But what oftentimes happens is it's kind of uncomfortable, isn't it? Yeah. All of a sudden, we shared something, and it's like, ooh.
Yeah, that uncomfortable silence.
I don't know about that, you know? And so that can shut these kids down. And I felt that a lot when I was growing up. And I think that's part of our activation and part of what strengthens this inner core knowing, to not just get fluffed up from other people like, oh, you're so great because you're in love all the time and you're, you know, painting rainbows all over the land. It's like, actually, there is this hard edge that I think that's where the process of the caterpillar to the butterfly comes into play here. It's a really beautiful analogy that I hope we can all remember when we're facing those tough moments of not feeling supported by the world around us, is that the rest of those cells of the caterpillar that are dying and fighting those imaginal cells actually become food for the imaginal cells. So in the long run, the imaginal cells feed, they receive the nourishment in a way from all of the dying cells, and that helps grow the butterfly's body. So if we could remember that which around us looks like, you know, the greatest challenge, or nobody seems to be supporting our work, or you're in a great mood and it just seems like the world is just such a hard place, and you get a little disheartened, just remember that you might be an imaginal cell, and that you might actually be a key component for the whole body of the planet to birth over this next few decades into what it is to become. And so I'm here talking to you today, and you asked me about my childhood, and so I could, of course, go into all kinds of stories and details, but I really feel like the real goal that I could offer is that it was extremely hard for me, yes, just like anyone who is sharing something that's new and uncomfortable for the world around them, and a lot of times I felt alienated and alone in that journey, but I feel that that's also strengthened and given me a lot of great tools to not need to count on that immediate reflection to show me if I'm on the right track, but more of a deeper inherent knowing that if it's bringing more beauty to the world, and I know that feeling of if my heart's on track, then I'm going to do it. So I think that again, if you're an imaginal cell, just don't worry if the world around you is trying to fight you or resist what you're bringing through. Eventually, they'll come around.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I suppose that's a beautiful story for any child or youth that is feeling alienated, but also for parents who are also have a feet in both worlds, where they've lived their whole life in this existing system, and then they give birth to a beautiful child who is an imaginal cell and has all these new ideas and seemingly far out ways of thinking and communicating. That's a beautiful story for them too, to realize that they can trust this process of change.
Yes.
Yeah. So you work a lot with sound, mainly with sound, and it's such a beautiful thing. It's a new thing I'm looking into, and it's so powerful. And I'm wondering if you can go into a little, what part do you feel that sound in itself plays in this new energy and this new earth? Your vision, how it will actually work to help shift things as a frequency, like as a thing, sound.
That's a wonderful question. I'm very inspired about sound, as you know. It's one of the core aspects of my life that I've been studying, exploring, sharing, creating through as a vehicle of consciousness for my entire life. So I really, I'll do my best to be concise with my answer, because I could talk about sound all day.
Yeah.
I really do feel that we're really just scratching the surface on what's possible with sound.
Yes.
I feel that throughout time there's been cultures who have been given tools and discovered ways to use sound to modulate the frequency of reality itself. For instance, the Egyptians and those who were on the planet during that time were able to figure out how to use sound as well as crystals to move large, huge blocks. That it's been, proven for quite a while now, for anyone who takes the time to research it, that the stories we've been told about how many of these epic architectural sites were created were actually impossible to do with just pure manpower alone. So there's really clearly other ways and techniques of using consciousness and sound that a few people have tapped into it, and I invite anyone who's listening to that not to just take my word for it, but go check it out yourself.
Yes, there's so much out there.
And so, without getting into too much of that, I do feel that we've tapped into sound a few times throughout our history on the planet, humanity's speaking, and I feel it's also been greatly misused, and so that's the reason that our power that's been gifted to us of knowledge and consciousness around sound has come and gone a few times on this planet, and this is symbolized by the great rise and fall of some great cultures on this planet, and Egypt just being one of quite a few, Atlantis being another, or Lemuria, and some of these cultures have gone into fairy tale status because we're so cut off from them in this day and age. But these cultures knew how to use sound in a very powerful way. So what I feel is happening right now, and what I'm interested in, is creating bridges into the explorations I and others have done with sound, to invite it back into the seat around the round table of our culture that it truly deserves to be in. Right now we have an interesting consciousness around sound. If you look at, just look into yourself and look into the conversations that you notice in culture around music. It's, there's like pop culture music, and you hear songs on the radio, and you think of like rock stars or musos and buskers on the street, and there's that area of how sound is used and looked at in our society as like, that's a certain group of artists that make sound, but I'm not really a part of that. That's kind of for them.
Yes.
But I'd like to just invite everyone who's listening to realize that we use sound all day long. We have this beautiful voice, these vocal cords, and this instrument that is a component of our body that we have the responsibility to learn how to use in the best way possible to create a more beautiful world. And so, similarly to taking good care of our body, how can we take good care of our voice that creates this sound in the world, and how do we learn how to use it as a gift and as an influence for good? So that's one of the areas that I teach and love to work with people on, both individual clients, and I do Jedi sound training modules where for 3 to 6 or 9 months I work with people in starting to use this tool of their voice as an alchemical tool to actually really change and modulate their lives to more deeply reflect who they actually want to be. Because oftentimes we're using sound in an unconscious way. Yes. That is limiting our ability to experience beauty in the world. And in one simple way that happens is when you start saying things that are limiting, that are kind of it's like that negative self-talk that we can often do about ourselves or other people. We're using sound like a magic wand to say, I don't really believe in myself. Yes. Or that person's, they're bad, look at what they're doing. All of a sudden, this is like this magic wand that is creating this field around us through sound to feed back to us exactly what we're putting out there. So the power of our voice and the power of sound is something I'm really excited about exploring as a culture and in our communities, and how we can start to use it wisely and well. And one of the ways that I love to do that is in the Band of Light concerts and events that I share. So I've been touring for, as you know, many moons, well over a decade now. And every time I come to share a concert or sound healing experience, whether it's 50 people or thousands of people, it doesn't really matter. I notice that there's this transformation that happens when we're using our voices together, when we're singing together, dancing together. And sound, I think, has been a little bit taken for granted as to how powerful it is to create new systems and new behaviors and new thoughts that can arise out of this place when we're feeling really good and using sound in a conscious way. So I've noticed that a lot of relationships have actually begun at a lot of Band of Light concerts. So I've shared so many concerts over the years, and I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me on the street or around the world and said, "Oh my God, here's my wife. We met at your concert and we fell in love that night." And it's just so interesting that the spirit of song and the spirit of music and singing, that's just one layer of sound. But even just that alone is not to be taken for granted. It's the powerful technology that it is to create change in the world and strengthen community and strengthen relationships. So one more point I'll share before I wrap this one up, because again, I could talk about it all day.
So interesting.
Is that where I see us going with sound, where I see we're headed? Yes. Is that we're going to be starting to gather into these new event centers, event temples, sound temples. Many of us have seen the visions of these kind of event centers of the future, and that's one of the projects that I'm working on called the Home Dome Landing Project, that its mission is to help to build many of these around the world that are all going to be able to communicate to each other and have multiple communities kind of experiencing sound and technology and even immersive visual environments together at the same time. And that's something I'd love to talk about more another time.
I'd love to hear about it.
But I see that where we're going is, as a culture, is that we're going to start realizing that sound is actually just as essential and actually even precedes science. It precedes technologies as a component of creating a balanced culture. And what I mean by that is that when you have an equal footing and a shared value system set up in our cultures, in our government, in our leadership systems, and the way that we create policy, everything. I'm talking all the way up and down the scale of culture. When we are honoring the influence that sound and the arts have, as well as science, as well as technology, as well as, education. You create more of this wholeness perspective as to how to create a culture that's balanced and whole and happy. So what I see coming is that we're going to start discovering that we actually we no longer can cut funding for the arts in schools and think that we can just put a bunch of money into sports and these other educational programs, but not the arts and sound, because then we're missing this huge piece of what it means to be a balanced, whole, happy human. And to create that space for our children is one of my deepest passions and inspirations. So I hope as a community we can continue to explore ways to invite our own thinking, as well as share this conversation, explore this as to how to take maybe how to receive some of the wisdom of our ancestors in some of these past great cultures that have come and gone, as to the power of sound as a technology. And I think that's a whole nother conversation, but that's where I'd like to end for now.
That's really exciting. It's really exciting. In another one of your songs, and I feel like this ties in a little bit with what you're talking about, it's called Throw Down Your Shield?
Lay down your shield.
Lay down your shield.
Yes. I like your style though, just throw it on down there.
Well, that's me. I'm not going to lay it. Which from my perspective, when I hear those words, when I close my eyes and really sit with those words, it's about opening, like letting that drop and having the courage, because for me, when I feel that, I actually do feel a little bit of fear come up, to lay that down and to be more open and transparent. And so I feel that is another beautiful gift that you bring, whether we're listening to your music or watching an interview like this. That does seep through even when we're not in your presence. It's felt. And so I feel that maybe that's something you have worked on doing and supported others in doing. And what I'd love to know, where I'm going with this, is what's your experience with this with youth? Bringing that energy to the table with youth who tend to live in a world where that is encouraged, like focus, goals. I don't care that you don't want to learn maths. You have to learn maths to live, and you have to get a job, and you blah, 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 the story. For me, that builds up the shield.
Sure.
And then to be met with someone who's let theirs drop, how do you feel that interaction is different? And what do you feel is their reaction, just in your experience?
Yeah, wonderful question. I can share what I've noticed in meeting children of all ages.
Yes.
Something really beautiful happens when you get down eye to eye with a child and you look them in the eyes, and when they feel that you see them and you understand them. And not many words need to be spoken for that to be the case, but as a mother, you know that if you have a child who's perhaps having a rough moment, and they're saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, I really want this candy bar," or whatever it is, mommy, and I'm sure you've noticed by now that if you're kind of going, not right now, because you're super focused and you've got a million things going, you've got your phones going off, maybe you're on the phone, So, but as soon as you get down eye to eye and look at that child in the eyes and say, "I hear you. We're going to be doing this right now. How does that sound?" It can diffuse that energy, because oftentimes if a child is asking for something again and again and again and again and again, it's just because they haven't felt heard yet.
Yes.
And that can be very frustrating. So like, okay, I heard you a million times, right? But so the reason I bring that up is because I think it has something to do with your question around the shield, where we start off with no shields, right?
Yes.
We're born into this world as the most tender, fragile, beautiful creature that exists. It's this baby, you know. We all start there, and then we learn and adapt and adopt these traits and body language and behaviors. One thing I want to bring to mind here is that the language of the mind is words, but the language of the heart is behaviors. And I find that we have yet to really arrive at a place in our communities and our culture where we value the importance of behavioral intelligence as much as we value IQ, or as much as we value how much money you've got in the bank, right? And so behavioral intelligence is something I'm exploring, and I invite anyone out there to just explore this and just feel out what that means for you. But with children, oftentimes they're witnessing the behaviors of everyone around them, and they're feeding off of that. They're riffing and they're jamming with their environment. And if they see adults who are expressing behaviors, they're kind of going to jam with that, and they're going to take that and adopt that into their own little bodies. And the sad truth is that we do live in a very shielded culture, in terms of where that song came from. It was really a prayer to the heart of every. It was written from the perspective of a man to a woman, but it's really written to the heart of every man and woman and child to lay down our shields and that which is limiting the flow of love between us. And so I feel that I have my shields come up all the time. The momentary thought of not feeling safe, or thought of like being in a dark alley and thinking, oh, is this person coming up? Like, I can feel little shields will go up and I'll have to go into. Of course, we're all humans. We have these tendencies, but the real calling is to notice when it happens and choose love in those moments. And so I find when I'm coming to children especially, and I have any kind of agenda, or I'm thinking about time, like, oh, I only have half an hour before I have to go. They can feel that, and they're going to they do not play in time, right? So I find that if we could embrace our children, even if we only have 5 minutes, with that sense of timelessness, and really get down to their level and just look into the presence of where they're at, then the shields are going to be down, and they'll feel seen and understood. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's what comes up for me.
Thank you. So the other thing that I would love you to share is, before, earlier in the conversation, we were talking about, you had your radio signal. Did you know always as a child that you would use sound and that would be your mission? And what advice you can give people, and this would go for children or adults, humans, who feel very lost. They haven't found their, calling, because from an outsider it's like, oh, that just seems easier. If you're a musician, you do music. It's really clear. What about me? Like, I'm not a musician. I don't, people have those questions. So do you have, I'm sure you get asked that a lot, do you have any words of wisdom and help for people to just really find their own mission? Because I feel like that's important for us as humans to know our dharma, to know in this moment. Of course, we don't know what is going to happen in the future, but just to check in.
Thank you. As a young child, I feel that I always had a sense of clarity around my mission. And I came to learn pretty quickly on that was not true for everyone around me. I thought everyone knew what they were here to do and knew that they were here to make the world a more beautiful place. I didn't think I was special in that way. I just kind of assumed everyone was here to do that. I quickly found out that I was sometimes looked at as a bit of a weirdo. And so when it comes to sound, I came from a very musical family. So both my parents actually were musicians, and my mom was a singer and a dancer, and my father was a beautiful singer and musician himself. And so I was really born into an environment where there's lots of sound happening, lots of music was celebrated, and there was a piano in our house, so it was always just encouraged and welcomed to explore with sound, and I really thank my parents for that. I think that children and adults who are wanting to explore sound, the first place to start is just immerse yourself in it, right? So to really invite and attract other musicians and masters and teachers of sound, as well as just have it around you. If you have a keyboard or a piano or a guitar sitting there, you're probably 1,000 times more likely to start playing it than if it wasn't around there, right? So just start to immerse yourself in it, for one. Two, when it comes to the mission part, because I really heard you asking in regards to, was I aware of my mission from a young age, and for people who are exploring that beyond just sound. I actually feel that these answers can't come from the mind alone, and that there's something that happens when I'm listening to music and when I'm singing and making music, that it's almost like it's just the most instant way to bypass the mind and get right into my heart and feel into things. And so when I'm singing and playing music, there's not any real mind happening. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do next. It's a little bit more ninja in that there's just like an initial reaction and response to the moment that is coming from a deeper inherent intelligence. And so sound links us into that place, and I would invite everybody, whether you think you're a musician or not, or whether you think you can sing or not, if you have a voice, you can sing, and it may be off tune, but who cares? It feels really good. Yes. And what I love to teach and what I love to share with clients and groups around the world is, let's reclaim the joy and the power of our voices together by just kind of getting out of our heads about it. Stop worrying about how it's going to sound, because you know what happened to me and what happened to a lot of people is that somewhere way back when we were kids, we were told, be quiet. Shh, don't talk. Only speak when spoken to. These kinds of messages are what most kids are told from a very young age, and that imprints the way our confidence about our voice and making sound, and we get so self-conscious about, ooh, I don't want to sing too loud because my neighbor might hear me, or oh, I don't want to talk too loud because then that person, I might get in trouble, right? So those little imprints when we're kids, they stick in our bodies, and they stick around as belief systems that we do need to release, kind of like sweeping out the temple so that we can let the sunlight shine on how beautiful and clean it is, rather than shining on all the dusty corners, right? So when the light comes in, and there's dusty corners, we get a little embarrassed, and we don't want to let the light in there. But if we take take it upon ourselves to sweep out the temple, so to speak, and then we all of a sudden become more confident in letting more light, more truth, more wisdom flow through our body and out into the world. And so, how do we clean out our temples? Well, sound is one of the ways we can do that. And I would just encourage everyone to try something that's really simple and really silly. And so one of the things I like to teach and to explore is, it really is important to get silly. And I think there's all this, especially in the quote-unquote conscious community or the spiritual community, can get a bit uptight, don't you think? There's a lot of people, and I have been guilty of this myself, and just kind of taken the path a little too seriously. Yeah. And I think that play is just as important as anything else. So I really encourage us to play with our voices, and as a starting point for anyone who just wants to take a couple baby steps into exploring sound in your life, just start playing with your voice. Yes. Notice how kids do it and start to emulate them. Kids have no problem going, ah, yeah, ha, 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 oh, eh. And they don't care what it sounds like.
Yeah.
They don't care if it's silly, if it's out of tune, whatever. They're just making sound. And all of a sudden, you'll notice they're probably laughing and smiling as they're doing it because it actually feels really good to make sounds. So let's challenge each other to play more. And let's challenge each other to say, hey, you know what? For today, let's just sing how we're feeling to each other instead of like in relationships. If you're having a tough moment in your relationship, I dare you to sing to each other what you're feeling, and watch it transform the energy just like that. There's so many ways we can use sound.
Yes.
Just kind of turn it around and get back into the flow with things. Sound is a vehicle for consciousness. It accelerates consciousness. So when we use it and we're only speaking through a very tight and contracted throat chakra, or this part of our body even physically is very tight, you'll notice that people who are kind of uptight, you watch a lot of the speeches of the parliament and the ministry and the presidents on TV, they're pretty tight because they're not really letting sound flow through them in a gentle, graceful way that's open and coherent and clear. It's very pressurized, it's very tight, and so you can see that in people's body language. So just notice in yourself, how's my jaw? Am I clenching my jaw right now? Is my throat feel relaxed as I'm talking to this person, or am I really uptight and kind of speaking really small, little voice? So I invite you to breathe into those moments and relax the jaw, relax the body, relax the neck, and just watch what kids do. They play, they move, they bobble around, they explore. They're much more like dolphins, right?
Yes.
And so dolphins are the masters of sound. So why do you think that is? It's because they undulate, they're open, they're free, they're playful, they make love all the time. They're very joyful beings. And so there's something to that I think we could explore. And I'll just stop with that.
Something that you said within that was that when you hear sound, it you feel it in your heart. And so what I took from that was, if people are searching for what it is that they're going to do or what they would like to do in the world, rather than coming from the head, to feel into what is a big yes in their heart, and go there and just take a baby step to the next, and feeling into your heart rather than logically setting steps and goals with your head. Would you kind of agree with that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. The head and the heart really are meant to work together.
Yes.
And the same is true. We could use the words like ego and soul, or we play with these different concepts. But anytime we're talking about concepts and we start to compartmentalize them into categories, just like we do with regular muggles and indigo children, then all of a sudden we've done that. We've categorized and we've separated in our mind to get comfortable with a definition, and that's valuable in some ways in terms of making file folders to store information. But when it comes to real human beings connecting, and we're so dynamic, it's important to make sure that we plug that information into the heart, and the heart only knows one answer. The mind goes into this two thing. It goes into this or that, either or. The brain is structured that way, but the heart feels one. It feels oneness. It's that when we feel one with someone, we're in our heart, and that's really I think why they call the heart the seat of the soul. I think that's an interesting phrase, and I sometimes think about that, and during the day I kind of check in a few times throughout the day with, where am I within my sphere of consciousness? Am I really just, I can feel when I'm in my head, or it's really an ego conversations that's happening, and I do my best if I'm noticing that I'm there. Yes. To invite my soul to sit down into my heart. It's like, take your seat, sit, go ahead and sit down in the throne. I know you were kind of up here for a little bit, but it's okay, you can sit down, and we still have access to this, because when the soul is seated here, it's kind of like you're Captain Kirk on the Starship Enterprise. All of a sudden you're in the captain's seat of your ship, and you've got access to everything on the screen. You've got, everything that the mind can do is very helpful, but it's a screen. It's not meant to drive the ship. Yes. So the soul is the driver. So that's kind of an interesting paradigm to explore.
Yeah, Yeah, that's beautiful. So feeling into our hearts is going to help us find our missions. Where I found you, Elijah, was in a movie, and we're going to use that term. Can I? And I would love to just say on what we were just talking about with the whole indigo, star children, blah blah, all the new words that we're using. I feel like we're all that, and that if we find what's in our heart and what we are here to do, we're all important. We've all got a job. Indigo children may be warriors. Crystal children may be this. Star children may be that. I'm sure that we're all a part of all of those. But if we feel into our hearts, we've all got an important part of the jigsaw puzzle that is at this moment. But where I found you was in a movie called Indigo Revolution. Yes. And I hear that you travelled with James Twyman, and he wrote a book I adore called Emissary of Love. It's just the energy of that book is so beautiful. Sometimes I just sit with it. It's just got such a beautiful energy. Powerful energy. How was that experience for you, delving into that realm of things, the indigo world of things? How was that experience of traveling and creating that movie and meeting these people? How did that? What part of that did you keep?
That's a great question, and I so appreciate that you're bringing that question to light just a few days before my return to the Byron Shire, because the last time I was in Byron was about 8 years ago, and we were premiering the Indigo Evolution, and I think we did it at the community center there. Yes. And I had the pleasure of living in Byron for a couple of months with some dear friends there in the Shire, and so it's interesting that here I am about to come back and do a couple of concerts, and so of course Indigo film would come up again, and what I really would love to share about my experience with that film is that I really went into it. I was quite young, and I still am very young, but I was quite young back then, and in my mid to late 20s, and I remember being asked to be a part of this film experience, and it came because one of the producers of the film and I met on Maui, which is where I had just recently moved, and kind of took a backpack and left my home and my band and a bunch of great opportunities, including a record deal. I left all of that to follow my dreams to Hawaii. I was having all these dreams about whales and dolphins and being in the ocean, and this overwhelming calling to go to Hawaii, and I couldn't deny it any longer. So in spite of what everyone around me was like, dude, you got all this great stuff, you just released a new album, you got a record deal opportunity, you should go for it. And I'm going, I'm out of here because the whales are calling me, man. And I was so glad that I followed that, because within 3 months' time, I met the producers of the Indigo Evolution, and they invited me to come back to the States from Hawaii and meet James Twyman and introduce my music to him and talk to him a little bit about my story. And within, just a few minutes, we were laughing and realizing that we were about to start a journey together. And he asked me, would you like to be a part of this film? And I said, yes, of course, I'd love to. And we talked some more, and he said, you know what, actually, I think I'd like to send you and your buddy in a tour bus. And he's got this big, giant peace bus. It has a planet. It says, may peace prevail on Earth, and he's toured in it in the past. He said, how about I'll just send you out in the tour bus with a film crew, and you guys just follow your hearts, and we'll just film you, and you'll kind of be the heart and soul of this film, and we'll do interviews and kind of shoot it around your journey. Yes. So, of course, I was humbled by that, and sounded like fun. So we went about and did it, and for 30 days, I was in this tour bus with a film crew of two, quite succinct film crew, and then one other man named Adam who was a part of it as well. so they filmed us playing music at sacred sites, connecting with children, connecting with communities. They set up some events where we went and played, and so that was the original focus of the film. Was it was going to kind of follow this journey of our tour, and needless to say, by the end of the tour, there's many challenges that came up for the crew. And a lot of that was between my friend Adam and the crew, because he's quite a live wire and a beautiful man, and I love him. And he also has a way. He's one of those indigos. We were kind of joking back then. It was like Adam and Elijah, the indigo kids, were kind of following on tour, but we weren't kids. We were in our 20s, but still kids, in their eyes. And but he, let's just say. He ruffled the feathers quite a few times, as many of the young ones can do, in not wanting to just go along with things that didn't feel true for him. So, needless to say, Adam was pretty much cut out of the film, which meant that a lot of our journey was kind of cut out and turned into a special feature at the end of the DVD, for those of you who have the DVD. But that was originally going to be the through line. That was going to be the story of the film. So, in a way, by the end of it, I got to meet just some beautiful beings and teachers like Doreen Virtue and Neil Donald Walsh and Matsuri Moto, and so I had just an incredible time, and I felt very honored to be included in many of these teachers and speakers that I felt that I looked up to at that time. And one thing I saw, however, through the making of the film is that by the end of it, I was very tired and actually kind of even a little disheartened at what I noticed in some of the spiritual teacher circuit of being some incongruency. And so for me and my personal journey as a young guy kind of coming into myself and into my gifts and starting to get into the filming, music, media, all of a sudden when the spiritual community, I noticed that there's a few gaps in the integrity of it, and that kind of, my inner rebel kind of wanted to distance myself from it right away, because I know it's like, they're saying these things on the screen, but behind the scenes, they're not really living it over here. I'm not trying to generalize everyone, but I'm saying in a few areas, I noticed that a few times during my journey making the film, and I noticed how that challenged me to the point of almost wanting to kind of disassociate with it a little bit. Right. And yet, what I've come to learn over the years in that is that was a part of myself that I was getting to see reflected to me by my elders that was helping me grow in a really important way, which is many of our gurus and our teachers give us the examples of what to do, and many of them give us examples of what not to do. And that's a very important teaching, because if we put everyone on a pedestal, we're bound to be disappointed at some point or another, right? Yeah. And so I found that what was really valuable and what came out of my friendships with all of those teachers I just shared with you was that I really saw how everyone is just doing the best they can as a human being, and that no one really has all the answers. And that if we could support each other to not go to these extremes of putting teachers on a pedestal, but rather learning and sharing in these gifts that we all have to offer, that we'd probably be a little bit healthier as a society. And the reason I say that is because of something that I've been exploring with recently called the tone of equality. And it's just a string of words that is that links me into a feeling of presence, that when I'm sharing with someone, I'm doing my best to find that meeting point of equality with them. And I found that in many of the teachers, some of them I experienced that with, and some of them I didn't. And I noticed that the ones that I didn't just gave me a really great lesson of how at any time that I'm in a position of sharing, or if I'm at a concert or I have the mic or I'm in an interview like this, that I want to do my best to build bridges toward this new earth, toward this new way of being, where we don't put our teachers on pedestals, but because then they can fall off a pedestal,
Yeah.
and they're bound to, because they're human, and just like you and me, we all have relationship problems. We all have a relationship with money that's evolving and still got some crunchiness to it that we're working out. We all have relationships with self-worth and all of that. So I guess what I'd like to say is that I deeply honor that film. Indigo Evolution was one of the pivotal moments in my life, and it actually kind of put me on a world stage in a way that was definitely much larger scope of connection and people seeing and hearing my music than was previous to that film. And it was my first experience of getting thousands of letters rushing into my email over the next few years that followed, from so many people who were inspired and affected and influenced by that film. And so I actually I feel like I'd love to just say thank you to everyone who's watched that film or been inspired by it, or has written letters over the years, or has just even silently kind of taken something home from that film. And what I hope that people have taken home from it is that we are all one, and that we all do play a piece in the evolution of this planet, and that the Indigo Kids and what was explored was kind of looking at one group that is really exemplifying that in these young, brilliant children. But I hope that what people take away is that we truly all have our part to play, and so I'm really excited to come back to Byron and ride the next wave of evolution with the family there. And I won't be premiering a film this time. I'll just be coming to share some of my music and plug into the community and serve in any way I can. But I feel, just in closing, I was in another film recently called Living in Light that I was invited to be a part of, and that also featured Neil Donald Walsh, again, Panache Desai, Eli Jackson Bear, and Gangaji, and a few other spiritual teachers, Mirabai Devi. And so it was the second film I'd been in with Neil Donald Walsh, and I'm really honored that I've been asked to be included in some of these films, and I've also I haven't necessarily used that energy to kind of ride a wave of doing book tours or film tours, and I think the reason for that is that I've still been cultivating what is my unique relationship and gift to share with the world. That does certainly include some teaching, but I to be really transparent, I've shied away from being a spiritual teacher, because I've seen the pitfalls of that path, and I want to approach it with as much care and wholeness that also includes room for my my inner playful child, that there's room to get messy sometimes, and there's just as much light and shadow to be talked about and explored and danced with, and that if everything is only New Age spiritual language all the time, then I notice how challenging that's been for some of the teachers who have been exemplified in that room, in that realm, is that they don't have a whole lot of room to express the rest of their humanity to people, because all of a sudden, if they do, it's like, oh, well, you said that? Yeah. You're supposed to be the spiritual teacher, and you had a hard day, or you, oh my God, you're eating meat? Or it's like, so I noticed that there's this tendency in humans to, when we put someone on a pedestal, we want to knock them off of it if we see anything that's out of sync with this vision we built up around who we think they should be. And I think I'm just sharing a bit of this background with you to share where I've come through being a part of films like the Indigo Evolution and Living in Light, as well as just being honored to be included in different councils and of course concerts all over the world. That I feel like I've been in just witnessing humanity's growth edge of how to take down that illusory wall between the audience and the rock star on stage, or the student and the teacher, because that still keeps us feeling separate. It feels less than. It feels like they've got it together, but I don't. And the truth is, and I just want to be clear with everyone who's listening, they don't have it all together. They really don't. But that doesn't mean that truth doesn't come through these great beings in order to help us all grow. So that's the distinction, is that we want to honor the truth, honor the message. And then in terms of how we treat the messenger, let's treat them with a little more grace, and treat them as human beings that are growing as well. So that's my prayer with all that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
My last question in closing for today is one that I ask all of the people who come on this show, because I'm creating a vision. What would be your vision for the most beautiful way to educate our youth? Because at the moment, the system is breaking down, and there's a lot of unhappiness in it at the moment. And so one of my visions is to create a new vision, a new reality where these children are supported and embraced and celebrated. And so I'm gathering all these amazing visions as I go along to create a beautiful vision to share with the world.
Thank you for that. That's beautiful to feel your intention and what you're holding in that. My vision for a more beautiful world for our children. The first vision that came to mind when you asked the question, I'll just describe a little bit of it, and we'll see where it goes. But immediately I saw a group of children in a circle in the center of a community. And I saw that these children were holding hands and kind of singing songs and sharing their wisdom, and that directly behind that were the parents, women, men, and then elders, and that there was this incredible kind of concentric rings of honoring them at the center of the learning cycle. And so anyway, that I think that vision alone really kind of represents the analogy of all the different ways I want to support and share my energy in helping build a more beautiful world, where we're starting to redesign our education, redesign our entertainment in terms of something I'm really inspired about in terms of the gaming industry and the social network and the internet, and the way that children interact with these environments, that they don't yet have access to some of the tools of consciousness that can help them use their great creative energies into building things. Like my young nephew, who I just visited in Portland, Oregon, where I was born, showed me this game he loves to play called Minecraft. And I'd heard about it, but I'd never really seen it. And I'm sure that it's just like such a massive thing for all the kids these days. And they're playing this thing where in this game they can build things. They can build worlds. And I was so blown away by what he had built in this world. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we were able to create platforms for children of all ages where they could build things that are directly applicable to projects that are happening on the planet and solutions that we are wanting to find on the planet, so that we could give them the role of helping to co-create the solutions to things like climate change and all these other things that are such big issues for people, that our children have answers for that. And they have very real, I think, embodied, simple, humble solutions of how we could behave and act and put our energies together to start that domino effect, to kind of redirect this path that has been a very destructive path humanity's been on. And it's been in large part because we don't listen to our children, and we don't listen to the wisdom that comes through them, and connect the dots between the generational wisdom chain. And so there's been such a disconnect between our elders and then our, the kind of middle of the road who are doing a lot of the working class, and then the children. And so to be able to connect those dots and create platforms that could help all of those voices be heard, and then grow and build off of each other. That's just one area I'm super inspired about in the Band of Light, and again, the Home Dome Landing Project is one way that I'm going to be creating that with a team of people from around the world who are passionate about creating new paradigm event centers, as well as a platform that can help support and serve children of all ages to connect and feel like they are playing a role in finding new solutions, as well as being a part of new forms of entertainment and gaming and all of that. So that's another huge conversation, but that's just a little bit of my vision for how to create that.
I love that vision. Thank you so much. Is there any information that we can access on your Home Dome? Is there anything out there yet, or is that yet to come?
It's soon to come. It's not anything I've built any online organization around yet, but within this next 6 to 8 weeks, I will be introducing a platform where we can invite more of a conversation. Right now, it's just been a core team around the planet who's been kind of starting to develop the initial infrastructure, because it is a large project and it will involve many hands. But I'm very inspired to share something soon that people could get introduced to, and that'll be coming up on my new website very soon.
Great, and I'll add the link underneath this video when it does come out.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you so much, and we are all so excited about your arrival in a couple of days to Byron Bay. And I appreciate all of the beauty, the shadows and the light, and your bravery to bring your whole self to the experience, the human experience. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Erica. Your warmth and just your centered way that you share yourself and have ask these questions throughout the day has been just very enjoyable for me, and I appreciate you allowing myself to kind of weave my way through all the questions as best as I can, and I'm so looking forward to coming to Byron in just a few days here, so thanks for welcoming me on the other end there too.
Thank you. See you soon.
Okay, aloha.